Hello, everyone. Welcome to our talk, Top 5 Meeting Tips, made possible by JIRA, Confluence, and Trello. For those that don't know, this talk will be recorded and the slides will be available afterwards, so no worries on taking notes. I'm John.
I'm Mary.
Mary and I work as strategy and operations managers at Atlassian. I work on Confluence, if you can't tell by my Confluence Hawaiian shirt, and Mary works closely with our JIRA range of products. We've both been at Atlassian for about 4 years, as Shannon said, in San Francisco and Sydney. And in that time, we've run and attended a ton of meetings.
So as strategy and ops managers, we help our product leaders create and execute our product visions, which means we're usually running the meeting, and if we're not running the meetings, we wish we were. I'm guessing you're in this talk because you've been to maybe one bad meeting in the last week, or if you're like me, a series of bad meetings over the course of my professional life. One meeting in particular put John over the edge and made us think really critically about good and bad meetings. We're actually going to reenact that exact hip chat conversation that inspired this whole talk.
So I was in a really frustrating meeting, and I needed somebody to vent to about it. I knew Mary could relate. Here's how the conversation went down. I'm in another so-so meeting.
I figured.
And trying not to freak out.
Stay calm, John.
I did. I did some yogic breathing.
Success.
And tried to meditate and just focus on all the sounds that I could hear.
Way to be, John.
Then I closed my eyes and meditated and thought about the physical space I was in.
You closed your eyes in a meeting?
Yeah. I thought about doing some low ohms, but I thought that might be distracting.
But you guys didn't come here to learn John's yogic breathing techniques. I'm guessing you're in this room because you aren't currently getting what you want from meetings.
We thought hard about why meetings are often so terrible. We crave progress, but more often than not, meetings don't deliver on the progress we're looking for. Today, we'll cover why meetings are a problem and what it looks like, and then we'll show you our 5 tips for making your meetings more productive, and we'll leave you with a few ways to apply those tips to your meetings. So let's start with the problem. Think about how many meetings you attended last week. Raise your hand if you attended 5 or more. What about 10 or more? 20 or more? Anyone go to 50 meetings last week? Wow. I'm impressed people actually went to 50 meetings. Studies show that people attend 62 meetings on average per month, which is about 15 per week. That many of you fit into that category. Now, it gets worse. The same studies also show that over half of those meetings are considered a waste of time. Now, that's not okay. Time is the most valuable resource for you and for your company. If you start to think about the cost of all that wasted time, it gets scary expensive quickly. In fact, someone in HR could probably calculate exactly how expensive your last purposeless meeting was. But we don't want anybody to lose sleep over it. Not only is it an expensive hour of your company's time, it's also triggering a range of reactions from people in the room. You've probably encountered these personalities in your meetings. Someone who accepts every meeting invite just to look busy. Someone who's there, but they're not quite sure if they're in charge, if they should be running the meeting. The flip side, the person who thinks they're always in charge when they shouldn't be. Another person who's there and taking notes, looking engaged, but is trying to get out of doing any work. And then my favorite, the person who comes just for the food. So it's not just about the money, it's also about the drain this has on all of us psychologically. It's a killer combination. In fact, studies show that 74% of meeting goers do other work during meetings. And 91% daydream in meetings. How many of you are already daydreaming? All right, that's not good. So what does a bad meeting look like? Sometimes it's obvious, but other times less so. Here's the meeting invite for the meeting that inspired that hip chat conversation. Now, at first glance, this actually looks like a pretty good meeting invite. It has some goals. It has a very loose agenda right there, and a link to a Confluence page to discuss. I'm sure a lot of your meetings look like this. But then what happens in the meeting itself? In this particular one, no one stepped up to lead it, the agenda wasn't clear, and the discussion meandered. 30 minutes went by, and it wasn't even clear why we were there. Have you ever felt like this? What did you do? What I did was start doing some yogic breathing. That helped me relax, but it didn't help solve the problem or help us do what we set out to, which was make progress. So how do we fix this? Is it even possible? It's likely that you're already an agent of change within your team, if not your whole company. Most of you are the powerful evangelists Atlassian relies on to spread the word about our tools. You're already a trusted resource in that sense. But the best teams combine great tools with great practices. Meetings are an essential practice for getting stuff done at work, and it is a skill that we all need to build. Improving meetings not only shows instant value for the Atlassian tools you're evangelizing, but can also enhance your reputation as someone who cares about productivity and succeeds at making yourself and your colleagues more productive. So it's easier than we think to make true progress. Once you know what a good meeting looks like, it's easy to spot a bad one ahead of time and ensure that a meeting stays on target and actually makes progress. Today, we're going to show you how to make sure that all of your meetings have 5 key qualities. They are a clear purpose and goals, well-defined roles, a structure that fits what you're trying to accomplish, an action plan so that you can follow up and actually make progress, and then finally, fun, which might seem like a nice to have, but we all do better work when we're having fun. Now, those are the qualities, but what we're going to teach you today is how to build the skill of meetings. Mary and I have spent a lot of time building our meeting skills and have come a long way in turning most, though definitely not all of our meetings, from bad to better to good. I'm going to let Mary walk you through the 5 most important tips we use in our everyday meeting life.
Thanks, John. Listen hard. I think some of these tips will finally put an end to your mid-meeting deep breathing. So John introduced us to the 5 qualities of a good meeting, and I'm going to use these 5 qualities to teach you the 5 tips you need to take every meeting from bad to good. Let's start with purpose and goals. Without either of these, your meeting is truly doomed. There's an endless list of reasons that people schedule meetings. We'd argue most of them are not worthy of a meeting. Often, we find people schedule meetings because they want something from us. Can you review this document? Can you help me file an expense report? Can you review my code? All valid questions, but none of them worthy of a meeting. In fact, we have products that can help your team answer all of these questions and many more without interrupting your flow with a request for help meeting. Much of this is better done asynchronously. For example, when you want someone to review a draft blog post, it's really easy to get input from your team by sharing the page and asking for inline comments with edit suggestions. Meeting avoided. And if someone asks you for a meeting to figure out how to get an expense approved, direct them to your company's service desk portal. We at Atlassian have all our internal service desks centralized at go/help, from legal review to tech support to toilet paper restocking. And you guys know better than anyone. If you need your code reviewed, all you need is to assign your reviewer a JIRA issue. All right, let's say you have some info you need to share with a teammate. It may be instinctual to schedule a meeting, but I challenge you to resist that urge. Because really all you need to share that info is a Confluence page. I typically create a Confluence page as an FYI instead of scheduling a meeting. I do acknowledge there's definitely a risk that people don't read the page, so I have a couple pro tips to make sure your audience consumes the info. First, I always use the info macro at the top of the page with a brief summary of what's on the page and what I'm asking them to do as they're reading through it. If I really need to make sure people read the page, I'll @mention each reader with a tick next to their name and ask them to check the box once they've read the page. A lot of things can be solved with a Confluence page. Loneliness, admittedly, cannot. I sit at a group of desks that's constantly empty, so I feel ya. There's only so far a good playlist can go to make an empty space feel full. But maybe don't schedule a meeting just to see people. So we probably sound like meeting haters right now, but we actually love a good meeting. A good meeting for us is scheduled because you need to make a decision that requires debate or discussion. Or you're looking to get other people's inputs or ideas via a brainstorm session. Often, your teams need regular check-ins to plan and keep in sync on what's happening. And then when you're kicking off a project, You need to start a new body of work, get everyone aligned and ready and raring to go. All good reasons for a meeting. So once you've established that you have a purpose that is meeting worthy, it's important to set a goal for what you want to accomplish in the meeting. Ask yourself, at the end of this meeting, what will we needed to have done to feel like we moved forward? You need to make sure everyone leaves the meeting not just feeling like it wasn't a waste of time, but that it was the most productive hour of their day. To do that, you need to start with the outcome in mind. So what exactly is an outcome? I'm going to try to give you guys a lot of examples, because my team still really struggles with this one. It's an area that's really important to get right, because it's a guiding principle for the rest of the meeting. So let's take some of the examples from our worthy purposes and draft some goal outcomes. This one's probably easy. When you need to make a decision, the goal outcome can be as simple as having made the decision. The decision in itself is, in fact, an outcome. Brainstorm sessions, they're going to likely revolve around coming up with ideas. The more specific you can get in articulating the type and quantity of ideas, the better. But at the very least, set yourself a goal of leaving the meeting with a robust list of ideas. Operational check-ins are where most teams skimp on outcome setting, which makes it all too easy to get off track mid-meeting. When the purpose of a meeting is to make sure everyone knows what's happening, set an outcome that enables you to focus on only the most important topics in your meeting, because the rest can be shared via Confluence page. For project kickoff meetings, kicking off the project, not an outcome. To make real progress in a kickoff meeting, the team needs to know what's ahead and how they fit into the picture. If everyone leaves the meeting with a shared understanding of next steps and owners, I'd call that a success. So as we go through all 5 tips, I'm going to build a checklist for you guys to make sure every meeting is great, whether you're participating or leading the meeting. So if you're a meeting leader, your prep for the meeting should start with asking yourself, do I even need to meet to accomplish what I want? And then, make sure your goal is stated as an outcome. What will you have accomplished at the end of the meeting? Participants, you're on the hook too. Before you accept a meeting invite, ask yourself, is there a goal? As a participant, you should also be asking yourself, do I even need to be in this meeting? And clearly defined roles can help answer that question for everyone. Just like every meeting needs a purpose, everyone in the meeting needs a purpose. Roles are a critical precursor for a successful meeting. Without clear roles, you'll end up with a meeting where 2 people are having a conversation while the rest of the people silently watch. Others completely tune out, clack away at their laptop, or worse, they derail the discussion by just having all together by trying to contribute. It really only takes one disengaged attendee to derail the entire meeting or distract the rest of us with their own chance. At Atlassian, we use the DAISY framework for making decisions as well as for defining meeting roles. The driver is responsible for corralling the people and info needed and is usually the meeting leader. The approver is the full-time owner of the project and typically responsible for making the final decision. Contributors are subject matter experts who have the info needed to achieve the goal of the meeting. And informed people should be communicated to pre or post meeting, but I generally advise not inviting them to the meeting. Less is more with meeting attendees if you want to keep on topic. And making sure everyone knows their role ahead of the meeting is critical. So what I do is I use the page I've already created with my meeting goals, and I'll @mention all the participants in a table with their role so they know it ahead of time. Back to the list. Make sure everyone in the meeting has a purpose. It requires just a few steps as a leader. Use the DAISY framework to assign and share roles out ahead of the meeting. Also, don't take on every role yourself. Distribute some of the responsibility. And as a rule of thumb, when assigning roles, the less people you have, the easier it will be to stay on topic in your meeting. If you're a participant, you are equally responsible for meeting roles. First, if you don't know your role, ask it. And in reviewing the meeting goal, if you don't see a role for yourself, decline. I bet you guys didn't think it'd take us 20 minutes into a meeting on agendas to get into a talk on meetings to get to the actual agenda setting. Here we are. You've actually already done most of the heavy lifting of your agenda creation by drafting the goals and roles. But good intentions are often lost without a little bit of structure. You wouldn't want your pilot to get behind the wheel of your flight without a flight plan. With just like a pilot flying a plane, there are best practices, but you also need room for adjustments depending on the weather, or in this case, how the conversation flows. And as you become a meeting pro, you can even find your own version of autopilot. A good agenda can be broken up into 3 key sections: the intro, the meat, and the wrap-up. The intro is a time to make introductions, review end-to-end agenda, and most importantly, remind everyone of the goals of the meeting. Depending on the length of your meeting, this should be 5-10 minutes max. I like to call the middle part of the meeting the meat. It should be the bulk of your agenda and include discussion, debate, whiteboarding, whatever techniques you need to accomplish your goal outcome. And finally, the wrap-up. This is the section most people skimp on, especially me. Make sure you save a minimum of 3 minutes at the end of your meeting to reiterate decisions made and establish next steps. So I'm purposely not giving you minute-by-minute structure, not just because I'm a free spirit from California, but because I think all meetings should have some room for freedom and spontaneity. Let's look at an example of one of my recent meeting agendas in Confluence. I'm pretty minimalist when it comes to making my agendas. I throw it on the same page as my goal outcomes and roles, and reference back to the goal outcomes as my guiding principle for making the agenda. For this particular meeting, it was a go, no-go decision. So after 10 minutes of context setting and work-appropriate banter, I dedicated most of our time to presenting and debating each of the 3 funding scenarios. I like using a Confluence table for my agendas because I can so easily add more columns with related info and actions as needed, like links to pre-read and related pages. I also make sure to @mention anyone when I expect them to drive a part of the conversation, making sure to also add in their time allotment so they know how to prepare and hopefully keep on schedule. For regularly occurring team meetings, I like to use a Trello board to keep track of topics we want to discuss in upcoming meetings. It works really well for my team because we often think of discussion topics on our commute to and from work, so we can just pull up the Trello app on our phone and add it to our living board so important topics don't get lost when we're away from our computers. I actually go the extra mile too and link this board in my team's hip chat room for easy access mid-conversation or mid-commute. All right, now's the time when I give you a sneak peek into the lives of Atlassians. I'm going to share a couple pro tips for making sure every meeting is a great meeting. They're going to sound obvious, but when executed smoothly, they can turn even the worst of meetings into your most productive hour of the day. I'm going to teach you how to use a timer to keep people on schedule, use some carefully crafted questions to keep people on topic, and when topics aren't relevant, I'll show you how to use a parking lot poster to curtail the conversation and get back on track. Let me walk you through how these tips play out in a typical Atlassian meeting. Keeping time can be harder than it sounds. I can very easily get caught up in conversation and lose track of time, which is why I always use one of these big timers to keep me honest. We have these cheap and cheerful timers in our meeting rooms throughout the Sydney office, though cheerful is an overstatement when it's buzzing at you to wrap it up. The nice thing about these timers is you can set it up on the table so anyone can see the red disappear as their time gets shorter. If I don't have one of those timers available, I just type in 3-minute timer in my search bar, and it automatically starts counting down for me. I do prefer the other timers, but this is the lowest effort way to keep your team on schedule. Try it in one of your meetings next week. So timers are great non-confrontational ways to keep everyone on task. What's harder is keeping everyone on topic. Whether I'm a leader or a participant in the meeting, I feel compelled to get us back on topic when we're led astray by a slightly more fascinating but less productive topic. To do so, I find the next pause in the conversation and ask if we feel we are all on topic. It helps to remind everyone of the goal outcome, and as you have access to a clock, remind everyone how much time is left. Phrase it as a question, so everyone has the opportunity to truly assess if the current conversation will achieve the meeting's outcome. There are some times, though very rarely, when conversations that may feel irrelevant are actually working through foundational challenges that need to be sorted out in order to progress. When it's an unimportant topic, we make use of a parking lot. A parking lot is just a place where we keep topics that don't belong in the meeting. We use this technique a lot at Atlassian, not because my teammates are always trying to derail meetings, but because we all have a lot going on at once. So when someone brings up marketing campaign tactics in a dev velocity meeting, I make use of any writing surface around me and jot that topic onto a parking lot to be revisited at the end or even after the meeting. As you can see, running meeting requires a good deal of discipline, mostly from the leader, but as a participant, there is a lot you can do to help too. For leaders, be sure to review the agenda at the beginning of every meeting. Don't assume it's fresh in everyone's minds. It's not. Also make use of a schedule to time box discussions. And lastly, always check in mid-meeting, if not more frequently. For participants, your power is also in questions. Always ask to review the agenda at the beginning of the meeting. It's a sneaky way to refresh yourself if you forgot, but there's probably somebody else in the group who could use a refresher too. All right, you have your meeting goals, your roles, and your structure in place. Now it's time to make sure you actually get stuff done. Progress requires action. I think a lot of times we schedule meetings thinking we're going to get everything done in the meeting itself. The reality is, meetings end up creating work. And if that work is going to get done, all actions must have both an owner responsible for driving the completion of the work and a date by which the work must be completed. John can tell you how much of a stickler I am for all meeting actions having both owners and deadlines. I'm also a bit particular about how actions get recorded. I find so often actions get lost in discussion notes. So I always capture actions at the top of the agenda page, in a separate section from the meeting's discussion notes. Confluence makes it super easy to insert a checklist, @mention the responsible person, and add a date to every single action item. And when you're the action owner, make sure you follow through. Get in the habit of checking your name when you complete your action, and go the extra mile. Link to your completed work on the agenda page, and share it out in your team's hip chat room. These days, there are so many channels. Do everyone a favor and over-communicate. My team has also started using Trello to track all of our actions. It's pretty lightweight, and you don't really assign cards to anyone, just add card members, which works for us because we see each other every day, and a lot of our actions are ongoing and require multiple people and stickers. I'll admit, my team uses mostly Trello and Confluence more than we use JIRA to track our meeting actions. John's Confluence leadership team uses this pictured Kanban board to track decisions in progress. And really, I could give 45, probably 90-minute talk on how to track your team's actions, both meeting and non-meeting related, in JIRA. And if you want to chat more about that, come find me at the JIRA Core booth after this. All right, the meeting comes to an end. You're all sitting silently waiting for someone to wrap it up. Or maybe your attention has already been stolen by the hip chat you just got announcing donuts in the downstairs kitchen. I encourage you not to leave this meeting without knowing what's next. Be the person who asks, what's next? It may seem obvious, but it's worth talking about how you'll work moving forward. Do you need another meeting? Will your project create a hip chat room? Or maybe you just agree that each of you share the meeting notes page once you've completed your actions. Whatever your protocol is, make it clear and write it down before everyone makes a mad dash for the donuts. All good meetings have action. Without it, you really can't make progress. For leaders, get in the habit of assigning every single action both an owner and a due date. And write your actions separate from the discussion notes in a section that will stand out at the top of the page. For participants, make sure you not only follow through with your actions, but that you also follow up and share out the results. And it's a good habit to be in as a leader or participant to ask everyone to repeat their actions at the end of the meeting. Repetition is your friend. I'll admit, your participant and leader checklists have gotten long, but there's one more thing we think you need to make all your meetings great: a little bit of fun. Okay, I'll admit, fun as a way to make meetings more productive can feel like an afterthought, and truthfully, we considered not adding it as a tip. But the more we reflected on our top meetings, we realized that every single one of them had an element of fun to them. There was actually a study conducted by a British psychologist, Sir Cary Cooper. It showed that employees who participate in fun activities are more likely to have greater psychological well-being and take less sick days, all contributing to greater productivity than employees who don't have fun at work. See, fun shouldn't be an afterthought. But I think the reason we were struggling to articulate fun as a tip is because fun should be reflective of your team's cultures. So I'm not going to prescribe to you how to have fun, because I'm sure your companies all have your own ways of sharing a laugh and having fun. But for my teams, we love making fun of ourselves, and we also love good music. So at my most recent offsite, we played what I'm trademarking offsite bingo. We listed the most overused business jargon terms, and each of us placed votes as to how many times we predicted each term would be used in the 9-hour offsite. Clearly, we all thought there'd be a lot of taking a step back in this day-long meeting. It was completely disorganized, and there actually wasn't even a winner, but it ended up being a fun way to laugh at ourselves and created natural pauses in the day for us to take a breath and take a step back. We also like to play music at the beginning of our meetings, or while we're brainstorming. Not only does it lighten the mood during the meeting, we often continue the conversations about the songs we play in our team hip chat room for days to come. See, John and I find that having fun with your team in meetings, hip chat conversations, and even the occasional cheeky JIRA comment makes time fly by and makes all of us more productive. Don't you agree?
Couldn't have said it better myself, Mary. If anyone is looking for some epic meeting music, check out Gustav Holst's The Planets. I particularly love Jupiter, the bringer of jollity. So now you have the 5 tips from Mary. But before we wrap up and get to some time for Q&A, I want to leave you with some practical applications of our tips so that you can go back and apply them to meetings you attend or lead next week. We didn't just make this talk because I had one bad meeting and sent Mary some strange hip chats. We did it because we really care about how teams work. We care about making progress and making an impact. And most importantly, we want to be happy and fulfilled at work. As we mentioned at the beginning, having great tools isn't enough. You have to combine them with solid practices. We tried to show you both today, so let's quickly recap. We highlighted 3 Atlassian tools. They work great together, but maybe you have your own favorites. We won't tell anyone. We also talked about key practices to pair those tools with, the 5 qualities of good meetings, and the ways you can make good meetings a habit. So at the end of this talk, we want you all to remember 3 key points. First, meetings may seem like a small annoyance much of the time, and a bit bigger of a pain at other times, but it's only small when considered on an individual meeting scale. The costs are much greater for your company's bottom line, your precious mental energy, and most importantly, the scarcest resource of all, time. Second, whether you're normally a participant or a leader, you can make a difference in one isolated meeting, a weekly recurring time suck, or even be the catalyst for a shift in your company's culture about meetings. Fixing meetings is fairly simple. It takes a bit of thought and a bit of work, but most people don't realize that, which is why most meetings are terrible. You have to build this skill, just as you build skills in coding, marketing, IT, or whatever it is you spend most of your time doing. It's easy and it's worth it for your team, for your organization, and for your own sanity. Finally, regardless of the type of meeting, number of attendees, or duration, it should always have these 5 qualities. I suggest putting them on a Post-it note on your monitor and using it as a little mental checklist to go through before you schedule or attend any meeting. Make sure every meeting you lead or attend has a clear purpose and goals, well-defined roles, structure, an action plan, and of course, a bit of fun. So we've talked about how meetings can vary based on your role as a participant or a leader, their purpose for decisions or brainstorming, but these features are consistent across all of them. They just might look a little different. So let's revisit our original bad meeting with the benefit of our tips. This was the invite, if you remember. First, we replaced the generic title with one that clearly shows the actual need for the meeting to make a decision. Then, we replaced the description with a clear articulation of the goal outcomes and invite people to review the Confluence agenda page for more detail. Now everyone knows why the meeting exists, and they have some context for what they're going to accomplish. In the original meeting, we lacked a clear leader. Spencer had sent the invitation, but he didn't take ownership of the meeting. Now, he's taken responsibility for setting up and driving the meeting, and has invited people to ask him questions in advance. He's linked to a page where he's provided detail, and in particular, he's clarified roles so that everyone knows who can actually make this decision, the progress we're looking for. Without clear roles, it would be impossible to achieve the desired outcome. We also have a clear agenda now, with topics, times, and owners for each one. The meeting leader allowed some time to make sure everyone knows why we're there and what's expected at the beginning, which enables attendees to keep the meeting on track. We do this in Confluence. You could do it in Microsoft Word or Google Docs, but the great thing about Confluence is it allows for shared commentary and debate right there on the page, which is captured for everyone. Let's say you're out sick, you can still reference the page. It's not lost in an email somewhere. Now, our last meeting had no action items and no plan to follow up. What happened? Time went by, no one did anything. There are two key ways to avoid this. You've already created space for everyone to record notes right next to your agenda. This helps clarify what you've actually accomplished and agreed upon. And then, you should make sure to assign action items with owners and due dates. Mary and I really recommend putting this at the top of the page so it's easy to find. Now, the meeting in question was at 11:30, so it didn't give an opportunity for my favorite way to make a meeting fun, which is to bring a six-pack of beers. But that doesn't mean you can't have fun anyways. This is one of our product managers reclining on a strange sofa we found at one of our offsite meetings. It's just a bit of clowning around between sessions to keep things light. It's always healthy to start a meeting off with a bit of pre-meeting banter. The degree to which you're having fun in your meetings might vary based on how formal your work environment is, but I think nonetheless, it's extremely important. Now, it probably sounds like we're giving you a lot more work to do when you came to figure out how to save time in your week. But first, remember that you're actually building a skill, and that always takes time and effort. And building a skill means you'll have it for life. It will pay dividends the whole way down the track. Second, it's not as much work as you think. You don't have to spend an hour preparing for every 30-minute meeting. The amount of preparation you do as a leader or a participant should be in line with the scope of the meeting. Let me quickly show you how. For small meetings with only a few participants, it can all be pretty lightweight. Have a chat to your colleagues beforehand about the goals. Roles are usually less of an issue in a one-on-one or a three-person meeting. You can provide an agenda in your meeting invite. Bullet points are fine. And you should track your actions whichever way makes most sense for you. I personally like to use a Confluence page for everything, including my one-on-ones, because I can just keep track of everything along the way. Now, for larger group meetings, lasting 60 minutes or more, with 4 to 6 participants, you'll need to do a bit more prep. Some key differences. Number one, you want to make sure to share the goals and the agenda beforehand to get feedback and buy-in from your attendees. You want to make sure to clearly state roles using the DAISY format Mary described, in particular for decision meetings, but we find this useful for all types. Your agenda becomes much more important. Make sure to have owners for each topic and time allotted for each topic as well. And finally, save time for action items. The bigger the meeting, the longer it's going to take to actually decide on what you need to do to follow up. Even if you're not the leader, ask to clarify with 5 minutes to go. Then there's full day-long meetings and offsites with lots of attendees. These require much more advanced planning, group buy-in, and vigilance throughout the day. So some key differences here. Again, make sure everyone agrees on the goals and outcomes beforehand and has the right context for the day. You might even have to have a short meeting before an offsite to agree on these things. Agendas are, again, extremely important, but it's also key to be flexible based on how discussion is going. Action items are important as well. Often you'll come out of an offsite with more questions than answers, and you need to make sure that each one has an owner and a due date so you can follow up. If you're the leader, you might need to drive the follow-up, but don't feel like you have to take all the action items yourself. So remember why you're having meetings in the first place: to make progress, to make an impact on the real work you and your team are doing. We often use the analogy at Atlassian of the gold rush. All of you out there are building amazing things. You're mining gold. We're just the ones that supply the shovels and the pickaxes. So if we can give you a better shovel and show you how to dig faster and smarter, you'll find more gold. I don't think miners were having too many meetings, but you get the idea. So like any good teacher, we have to follow our own advice. Here are 3 action items we want all of you to take following this presentation. First, you all know what a good meeting looks like. Write down your checklist on your monitor and go through it each time you're invited to a meeting. Second, check your calendar on Monday. Actually, let's do this right now. If you have your calendar on you, maybe it's on your phone, take it out and look at your schedule next week. For every meeting that actually adds value, give it a check mark. For every meeting that doesn't, there's no goals, there's no agenda, you're not sure who the leader is or why you're invited, cross it out. And for all those meetings that aren't adding value, what you should do is follow up with the leader. Ask for the goals, ask for the agenda. And if you don't get them, decline it. You'll have more time left in your day. And if people aren't going to take you seriously by giving you the goals and the agenda, then I don't think you should spend time in their meeting. Finally, when you're attending your meetings next week, make sure you and everyone else knows exactly what the goal outcome is, because it all starts from that. In conclusion, your time is valuable. When people think you value their time, they trust you more. So in your first meeting next week, try out these tips, whether you're the participant or the leader. Ask for the goals if you have a blank meeting invite. Go through the agenda at the start. Clarify action items at the end. Leave people thinking it was their most productive hour of the week. And you'll be known for getting stuff done in no time. That your meetings are still a waste of time, and you're still getting upset, I recommend trying yogic breathing. It works for me. Thanks so much for coming to our talk. The slides and recording will be available online shortly, and I think we might have some time for some questions, if any.